one was ruled out. And in the end, it wasn't any of them, or any of the named men that filled over 1,000 pages of police reports. But it was someone they had encountered before. Someone who had crossed paths with law enforcement multiple times. Someone who didn't hide. He just never stood out. But he should have. The final name was James Paul Fort, a 22-year-old bartender in Hazleton at the time of the murder. He lived 6 blocks from Maurice's home and directly across the street from the cemetery where she was later buried. But they couldn't come to a definitive conclusion that James Fort had been Maurice's killer on Eric's work alone. They needed proof. So the state police did something rare and controversial. They filed a request to exhume James Fort's body. A few months later, from deep beneath the soil, the truth finally came to light. Fort's DNA was a perfect match to the sample found on Maurice's clothing nearly 60 years earlier. When we got the call, there were no cheers, one officer said. There was just silence. Then, someone whispered, "We got him." When the name James Paul Fort was finally revealed to the public in 2022, many in Hazleton reacted the same way. Who? It was a name that had never appeared on the long list of suspects chased down over the decades. And yet, he had been there all along. Fort had grown up in Hazleton. He graduated from Hazleton High School in 1959. In his yearbook photo, he looked like any other clean-cut teenager of the time. His caption said he was interested in sports, but that his future was undecided. He didn't go far. In the 1960s and 70s, he lived at 118 West 14th Street. He also later had addresses at 745 and 770 North Laurel Street, both within a mile of the Chivarala home on Alter Street. The trailer he once lived in was destroyed in a fire in 2003, long after Fort had died. He was never married, never had kids, no stable job that lasted. He floated, but there was a darkness in him. Although James Fort had never appeared in a long list of suspects chased down by police over the decades, his image may have. As you may recall, back in 1964, police had released several sketches of unidentified men wanted for questioning after acting suspiciously around Hazleton in the days and hours surrounding Maurice's murder. One of those sketches, sketch number 3, was of a man who had reportedly entered a local woman's home under false pretenses and attempted to assault her. Now, take a look at the sketch next to James Fort's high school photo. Now, there's no way to know for sure if this is the same man, but the resemblance is eerie. Both men were around the same age. Both had dark, full hair combed back. Both had a long, narrow jawline and pronounced cheekbones. Even their eyebrows and nose shapes seem to match. While police have never publicly commented on any similarities between James Fort and the man in sketch number 3, and this comparison is only our personal speculation, it raises a haunting possibility. Did they have the killer in their sights all along and just didn't know it? If sketch number 3 was indeed James Fort, it means the investigation came incredibly close to catching him, almost 60 years earlier. And it makes what happened later in 1974 feel even heavier, because perhaps if someone had made the connection when the sketch was originally released, another victim may have been spared. In April of 1974, 10 years after Maurice was killed, James Fort was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police. The charge? Aggravated assault. According to the report, Fort had taken a 23-year-old woman to the Capri Lounge at Alter and 2nd Street, very close to the Chivarala's residence. They left around 4 a.m., and he offered to drive her home. But instead of taking her home, he drove into the woods, Stockton Mountain, a remote stretch in Hazel Township, and forced himself on her. By sheer luck, a truck pulled up behind them. Fort panicked and drove off, but instead of taking the woman home, he dropped her at the corner of West Broad and Vine Streets. Disoriented and shaken, she called the police immediately. He was charged with extremely serious charges, even by 1970s standards. But he struck a plea deal. Only the aggravated assault charge stuck, and Fort walked away with 1 year of probation. The more serious charges were quietly dropped in the plea deal, according to newspaper reports. And still, James Fort allegedly didn't stop there. Gina Donahue Connors came forward after the case was solved, bringing with her a chilling memory that haunted her for more than 5 decades. She was about 9 or 10 years old at the time, walking with a friend on Alter Street, just blocks from where Maurice had last been seen. A white car pulled up. The man inside leaned out the window and urged the girls to get in. "Come on, we'll give you a ride," he said. Gina declined. He pressed again. No, come on, we'll give you a ride." Alarmed, the girls ran to a nearby store and got help. The man drove off. At the time, No one connected the incident to the unsolved murder from years earlier, but when James Ford's face was revealed in 2022, Gina couldn't believe it. According to her, it was the same man. My memory is just so vivid, she said. I'm still shaking. I mean, even just thinking about it. It seems as though Ford had kept circling the same streets, the same corners, waiting for another chance to do the unthinkable again. In 1978, Ford was arrested again, this time for reckless endangerment, after neighbors on Manhattan Court and 11th Street reported a man running with a gun. Ford, along with 2 others, was charged. But that case went nowhere. The disposition is unknown, and still, no one connected the dots. No one thought to look back to 1964. No one thought, could this be the same man? For nearly 2 decades after Maurice Chivarala's murder, Ford lived among the people of Hazleton. He lived across the street from the cemetery where her body was buried. He likely walked past the little market on Alter Street, where Maurice once helped stock shelves for her father. He likely saw her photos in the newspaper, saw the decades of updates from investigators working tirelessly to find him, saw the pain, suffering, and fear that his actions brought upon his community, and said nothing. He died of a sudden heart attack at age 38 on May 16, 1980, while bartending at the Genetti Best Western Motor Line on Route 93 in Hazel Township. He was buried, mourned by few, forgotten by most, but not by DNA. When Pennsylvania State Police finally held the press conference in 2022 to finally name Maurice's killer, it was filled with reporters, microphones, camera crews, and the people who mattered most, Maurice's surviving siblings. They had waited nearly 6 decades for this moment, and when they spoke, it wasn't with anger, it was with quiet dignity. We never sought revenge, one sibling said. Only truth, only justice. They thanked the investigators. They thanked Eric Schubert. They thanked everyone who had refused to let this case be forgotten. But mostly, they remembered Maurice. Corporal Mark Barry, the man who inherited the case in 2017, choked up as he addressed the crowd. We're told not to get attached to cases, he said, wiping tears. But how can you not get attached to this one? He revealed that the Chivarala case had become one of the oldest cold cases in U.S. history to be solved through genetic genealogy, and he gave all credit to those who came before him. More than 20 members of the department had been in charge of the case since 1964. Over 4,700 documents were generated. Generations of troopers kept coming back to it, hoping for one clue, one break, one answer. And finally, they had it. The resolution of the Chivarala case was more than just a victory for science. It was a statement that no matter how long ago a crime was committed, the truth still matters. That victims don't get forgotten, not if the right people keep asking the right questions. And that sometimes justice isn't swift, but it can still be delivered. Today, the Chivarala case is now part of a growing list of cold cases being cracked open not by guns or badges, but by DNA, genealogy, and diligent sleuths like Eric Schubert with a computer and determination. Dozens of other cases have since followed, and investigators across the country now work side by side with genealogists like Eric to find the names no one else could. Maurice's case was proof of concept and a rallying cry. When asked what made this case different, Eric Schubert didn't talk about the DNA or the family tree or the late nights staring at census data. He talked about Maurice. She did something kind that morning, he said. She wanted to bring fruit to her teacher. She just wanted to do something good, and I think that's what stuck with me the most. She deserved better, and if I could help in any way to give her that, then how could I not? He doesn't consider himself a hero, just a guy who knew how to follow the breadcrumbs, a puzzle solver. But to Maurice's family, he was something much more than that. All this time, the Chivarala family had lived with the weight of uncertainty, the constant background hum of grief, and while they had learned to live around it, that wound had never closed. But now, they had a name, a face, an answer. For the first time since that terrible day in March 1964, they knew who had taken their sister. At the press conference, Maurice's surviving siblings stood together, speaking softly but firmly about what the moment meant. We have so many precious memories of Maurice, one said, but at the same time, our family will always feel the emptiness and sorrow of her absence. Consequently, we will continue to ask ourselves, what would have been? What could have been? Our parents expressed their sentiments a long time ago, Ron Chivarala added. They didn't want punishment or revenge. They wanted justice. Their parents, Mary and Carmen Chivarala, had both passed away before the case was solved. They had lived their lives without ever knowing who killed their daughter. And now, standing there, their children, carried their hopes forward. The family also made sure to personally thank law enforcement, and especially the frontline team of troopers who had never stopped working the case. Over the past 58 years, the Pennsylvania State Police have continuously worked this case, Ron said, and a special thanks to the frontline team. Our family thanks you so much. And then, of course, they thanked the young man who had made the final breakthrough, the teenager who had shown up with nothing but a mind for puzzles and a heart for justice, Eric Schubert. Everything that had to go right did, Eric said, reflecting later. We just kept chugging forward these really small DNA samples until we got the big fish, which we did in Mr. Fort. But it wasn't full closure. Not completely.
12 seconds.
As Ron Chivarella said, I don't have closure. That it's all behind me. As Carmen said, we're all going to have memories of that horrible day. But for the first time in 58 years, the family had the truth. James Ford didn't face a courtroom. He never had to look the Chivarella family in the eye. Never had to explain himself. Never had to speak her name. He died in 1980, still a free man, never having faced any concrete repercussions for his actions. But justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it just means answers. And for the Chivarella family, for Hazelton, and for everyone who kept this case alive for 58 years, that answer was enough. Hazelton is not the same place it was in 1964. The town's changed. The stores have changed. The names on the mailboxes are different. Even the little market is long gone. But the story of Maurice Ann Chivarella remains etched in its heart. For every child that walks to school, for every parent that cares for their children, for every detective, with or without a badge, who refuses to give up, she matters. If you enjoyed this video, then consider hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. It's the best thing you can do to help us keep making more of them. Like this one, about a man who came back from the dead looking like this, after surviving Mount Everest's death zone, where over 300 people died. Click the video on screen to watch now.
Damn. Dw2 Rw2 Coolio. That is Coolio.
I want to share my culture with new friends from around the world and feel supported along the way. I want to make my parents proud and graduate with the skills for my dream career.
I want to study at a university that is recognized around the world, giving me global opportunities. And that's why I chose this.
Have fun with the new delicious Tiger Bites emojis. 3 words. White female bones. Christina couldn't get them out of her head. As a genealogy student at Cleveland State University, Christina Skates was sat in the dimly lit library, hunched over stacks of old cemetery records, flipping through pages filled with the dead, when she came across an entry that stood out. White female bones. No name, no description, no past. Just an entry in a burial log, strict of identity, with a number in place of a name. Woman 82483. She frowned. Something about it didn't sit right. She was used to coming across records with missing details, illegible handwriting, or dates that didn't quite match, but this wasn't a mistake. This was someone, a woman who had lived, breathed, and died, only to be reduced to a number in a forgotten file. She leaned back, exhaled. Maybe it was nothing. Probably just one of the countless unidentified cases that had slipped through the cracks over the years. But still, she couldn't let it go. She picked up her phone and dialed the cemetery. Maybe they could tell her something. Who woman 82483 was, where she came from, why no one had claimed her. but the answer she got was worse than she expected. Nothing. The cemetery had no information to give her past those 3 off-putting words on file. Since her burial in the unmarked mass grave, no one had come forward. No investigation had continued. The case had been left to collect dust, just like the records she was holding. And that was supposed to be the end of it. But for Christina Skates, it was only the beginning. Christina shared her findings on Reddit, expressing her frustration over the lack of progress. A call to the cemetery confirmed that no action had been taken since her interment. I have attempted to contact the city's detective, but have not had any response in months. Taking matters into her own hands, she dug deeper, looking through brittle newspaper clippings and grainy microfilm reels, tracing the mystery of woman 82483 back to its inception. 40 years prior, on February 5th, 1975, 3 teenage boys were hiking through Rocky River Reservation Park in Strongsville, Ohio, until they saw something that stopped them in their tracks. Down by the riverbank, half buried in the damp earth, something pale jut out from the mud. At first, it was just a shape, an odd one. They step closer. The shape doesn't move. They see more fragments tangled in the roots and debris. It's a skeleton, and it's been here a while. Now you'd think this would be the moment they run straight to the nearest phone, but no. For reasons unknown, maybe shock or teenage logic, don't report it right away. Hours pass. Maybe they tell their